Good morning, boys and girls. Thank you for joining with me as we seek to learn something more in our faith in the risen Lord Jesus Christ together. I have a storybook for us this morning, and it's again by Max Lucado called Best of All. Higher on the right! Higher on the right! Demanded the mayor. There was no patience in his voice. Chip, the Wemmick, lifting the banner, stretched as high as he could and pounded the nail into the pole. Better? He barely asked the question when his ladder began to sway, first to one side, then the next, and then crash! Chip grabbed the nail he'd just hammered and he held on. Perfect, declared the mayor. Just perfect. As Wemmicks ran to the rescue of the dangling worker, the mayor's wife read aloud the words stretched over the street. Wemmicksville welcomes Miss Bess Stovall. Oh, she clapped her hands as she spoke. What a wonderful day. Whoever would have thought that such a famous person would ever visit our village? You know what they say, don't you? Everyone leaned forward. When it comes to Wemmicks, she's the best of all. Punchinello and Lucia were near enough to overhear her words. Like the rest of the townspeople, they were wooden Wemmicks made by Eli, the Wemmick maker. But unlike the rest of the village, they were puzzled. Tell me again, Punchinello asked the mayor's wife. Why is she so famous? Because everyone knows her. But why does everyone know her? Because she's so famous. But why is she coming to Wemmicksville? Punch asked. The mayor's wife rolled her eyes in disgust. Oh, haven't you heard? She's here to choose members for the wonderful Wemmicks Club. Punchinello nodded like he understood, but he really didn't. He looked at Lucia, and she looked at him, and both shrugged their shoulders. He was just about to ask another question when the watch Wemmick on top of the hill shouted, She's here! She's here! Doors flew open. Stores emptied, villagers rushed from all directions to the end of Main Street. Fathers lifted children to their shoulders and short Wemmicks elbowed their way to the front of the crowd. There was so much shouting and pointing and tiptoe standing until a uniformed wooden soldier, looking very official and formal, appeared at the turn in the road. With scroll in hand and bugle hanging from his neck, he marched over the Wemmick River Bridge and stopped in front of the crowd. Staring ahead at no one, he stood stiffly until all had hushed. Opening the scroll, he read in a loud voice, Cut from the grandest forest, carved from the strongest tree, full of sap, only the purest, she's of the highest pedigree. So welcome ye Wemmicks to your village so small, the noblest grain from the finest lumber. She is Bess Stovall. With snappy movements, he tucked the scroll under his arm and pulled the bugle to his lips. Ba-da-da-da-da-ba. What the Wemmicks saw next caused the village-wide gasp. A squad of soldiers marched around the corner, shouldering a tall box with curtains. From behind him, Punchinello heard the crowd whisper, It's her! The box sat on two poles, and the poles rested on the shoulders of 4 soldiers. Two guards walked in front, 2 walked behind. Boots on the wooden bridge made the only sound. Click, click, click. They kept in perfect step until one of the soldiers stumbled just slightly. The box leaned out over the water. The villagers gasped a second time. The box leaned much further, and the guest of honor would fall into the fast-flowing river, they thought. But the soldiers straightened themselves, crossed the bridge, and came to a stop in front of the mayor and his wife. And they lowered the box. The trumpet-toting, scroll-reading servant stepped forward, and after a long pause, pulled back the curtain. As Bess stepped out, The villagers stepped back. They'd never seen a wooden person quite like Miss Bess Stovall. Feathers flumed out of her hat. Earrings dangled to her shoulders. Both her lips and her dress were bright red. Her shoes were tall. Her nails were long. And most noticeably, a large golden letter M hung around her neck. When she snapped her fingers, a sentry handed her a white cloth. With it, she carefully wiped the M and held it up like a mirror before her face. Seeing her reflection, she adjusted her hair and smiled. Bess Stovall was pleased with herself. With eyes peering down her high nose, she held out her hand, allowing it to fall forward at the wrist. Ahem. The mayor's wife understood the gesture. She held out her husband. Kiss it, he did. And when he did, the visitor spoke. What good fortune is yours that I have come your way? She smirked, head back, hand still extended. The mayor's wife curtsied and motioned for the other Wemmicks to do the same. They did, even the men. Shall we get on with the greetings then? Bess asked. Of course, answered the mayor. Everyone in line. One by one, the citizens of Wemmicksville passed before their guest. Yes, yes, she would reply to whatever they said to her. Welcome to our village. Yes, yes. We're glad you're here. Yes, yes. We're all so honored. Yes, yes. She was less concerned about what they said than what she saw. Occasionally she would pause and stare deeply at Wemmick. She examined the nose of the store owner and the ear of his son. She ran a gloved thumb across the hand of the house builder and took a long look at the forehead of the painter. No one knew what she was looking for. No one asked. Although the wife of the mayor acted as if she knew, nodding whenever this famous guest nodded and sighing whenever the famous guest sighed. The shortest and longest looks were given to Punchinello and Lucia. Upon seeing Punchinello, Bess suddenly stepped back before he could touch her hand. Lifting her nose and waving away, she instructed, Go on, go on! Stunned, poor Punch didn't even move. He just stood there, curious. Move on, her servant repeated with a firm voice, and Punchinello moved on. Lucia started to follow him, not wanting the same treatment. Suddenly the grand visitor stopped Lucia. My, Miss Bess Stovall admired. What have we here? Her eyes widened, and for the very first time since she began greeting each of the Wemmicks, a smile softened her narrow face. Wow, such fine grain. What a lovely shade. Are you maple? Lucia didn't understand. Excuse me? Are you made of maple? She had to think a bit before answering. Why, yes. Which forest? Lucia paused and thought. It took some time for her to remember. The majestic forest, she finally answered. And Bess placed her hand over her mouth in surprise. Then you and I are of the same family tree. We are? Miss Bess Stovall laughed. Of course. And then she leaned forward and whispered, How nice to finally find someone of my roots. Stay around and we'll talk. So Lucia did. Between greetings, Bess Stovall would make remarks to Lucia beneath her breath, such as, Ugh, what a naughty timber he's made of, or such an inferior grove of trees he came from, or, definitely from the wrong side of the mountain. Lucia understood none of the comments, but she didn't say so. After all the greetings, Bess signaled for Lucia to step near. Tomorrow, we must chat. I have something for you, she said, fingering her M necklace. With that, she turned and left, escorted by the soldiers, followed by the mayor and his wife. Punchinello approached Lucia. Did I do something wrong? I don't know, Lucia said. Did you do something right? I don't know, she said. Why is she so kind to some mimics and so rude to others? I think it has to do something about your ancestry. My what? What forest you come from? Why does that matter? I don't know. So they turned and left the village. Neither one spoke. They hadn't known they were different, and now that they did, they didn't know how to feel. I'll see you tomorrow, Punchinello finally said. Yeah, sure, Lucia replied. Neither of them felt too happy. As the days passed, they saw each other less and less. It took Bess Stovall only a short time to select her favorite Wemmicks for the wonderful Wemmicks Club. Lucia was among them. So were the store owner and Mr. and Mrs. Mayor. Bess gave each one of them a large gold M to wear around their neck. The M is for maple. You are maples, she explained as she showed them how to polish the medallion. Not all Wemmicks are equal, you know. Some are common, made of pine or elm. A few are quality, cut from maple, like you. Fewer still of us are from a fine family tree. She glanced over at Lucia, and Lucia blushed. The other Wemmicks politely applauded. And then Bess Stovall curled her lip as if she just tasted something sour. And then some Wemmicks come from willow trees. Willows? They asked. Willow is weak wood, the maple Wemmick explained. It bends, it bruises, has shallow roots. No one wants to be a willow. Do you know any? The mayor's wife asked. Actually, there's one in your village. They all leaned forward, curious. Bess looked again at Lucia and said, your friend. Lucio gasped and asked, Punchinello? Everyone gasped. I always knew he was weaker, someone said. Been suspecting bad family genes for years, another one said. Such a poor sapling, added another person. The rest nodded. And Lucia nodded with them. From that day forward, Wemmicksville began to change. Townspeople took notice of each other's tree type. The walnuts looked down on the pines. The pines looked down on the elms. The maples looked down on everybody. And everybody looked down on Punchinello. The walnut tree people formed a club and opened up several branches. Elms cut a path and named it Elm Street. Maples built a treehouse and hosted M-polishing parties. Everyone had a group, everyone that is, except Punchinello. And even Lucia ignored Punchinello. Hi, Lucia, he would say to her. Yes, yes, she would reply, not even glancing at him, not stopping. She was, after all, cut from the finest type of tree. And Punchinello, he was just a willow Wemmick, soft and easily bent. One day, Punchinello felt especially alone. He went to the pine picnic, but no one would sit beside him. The walnuts were playing games, but no one threw him the ball to include him. He even tried to go to the maple party, but the sign on the door said, Royal Tree only. Punchinello felt very sad. He went for a walk and sat down by the river where the willow trees grew. Why did I have to be a willow? He said aloud to no one in particular. What would you rather have been? The sound of the voice startled Punchinello. He turned and saw Eli, his maker. Maple? Eli continued. Would you rather have been made of a maple tree? Punchinello didn't answer. Both sad and embarrassed, Punch lowered his head. Eli walked over and lifted Punch's chin with a finger. Other Wemmicks are better, Punchinello told him. Who says? Everybody. Eli sighed and shook his head. Come here. The two walked over to a willow tree and stopped. Punchinello, who do you think knows more, the Wemmicks or the Wemmick maker? Punchinello smiled softly. The maker? Of course I do. Do you think I knew what I was doing when I made you? The look in Eli's eyes convinced Punchinello that he was about to hear something important. Eli continued, you are special, my child. You are the way you are because I made you that way. You chose my forest? Punch asked. Yes. You chose my wood? Yes. Willow is just as special as maple? Eli said, just as special. So why do other people, all the other people, treat me like I'm not? Here is someone you can ask. Hi, Punch. This time the voice was Lucia's. Punch turned. I'm sorry, she said. I've been listening too much to them, not enough to Eli. Punchinello shrugged. He noticed that she wasn't wearing her M necklace. That's okay. Both of them smiled. You want to go back to the village, she asked? Today's the big send-off for Miss Bess Stovall. Yeah, I'd like that. So the two of them said goodbye to Eli and walked back towards Wemmicksville. Many Wemmicks turned when they entered the village. More than one whispered and pointed as the Maple Wemmick and the Willow Wemmick actually walked side by side. But Punchinello and Lucia didn't care. They were glad to be friends again. All of Wemmicksville turned out to say goodbye to Miss Bess Stovall. She stepped into her box and signaled that she was ready to go. Her soldier escorts marched proudly before her. Her buglers sounded the farewell, and Wemmicks lined up on either side of the river to watch. And new members of the wonderful Wemmicks Club wore their new club t-shirts with pride. Crossing the bridge, the honored guest waved her gold medallion at the crowd. Farewell, lowly Wemmicks. Perhaps someday I'll honor you again with my presence, she shouted. But Bess Stovall leaned out the window of her special box so that everyone could see her, and as she did so, she leaned out a little bit too far and began falling. Her tumble stopped when her medallion chain caught on the bridge rail. When it snapped in half, she grabbed one end and held on tight, the river roaring beneath her. Wemmicks cried out with alarm. Help her! The mayor's wife shouted. Save her! Someone yelled, but no one can reach her, said an onlooker. I can't hold on much longer, Bess shrieked. The soldiers tried, other Wemmicks tried, no success. They were too stiff to bend underneath the bridge. Let me try, shouted Punchinello. I'm made of limber lumber. Not waiting for an answer, he ran to the edge of the bridge and sat with his back to the river. Grab my legs. When the soldiers did, he leaned back, bent over double, and twisted around until he was hanging upside down. Instantly, he could see the wide-eyed Wemmick, Bess. She was clinging to the chain, her feet pulled by the river. I'm coming, he shouted. Then, to the amazement of everyone, he bent back, until he was under the bridge, reaching for the desperate Bess. Take my hand, he offered. This time she didn't care what kind of wood she touched. She grabbed his hand and held on tight. Now you must let go of that chain, Punchinello instructed. So Miss Bess Stovall obeyed the little Wemmick, letting go of her precious medallion and watching it fall into the river below. Punchinello swung forward, pulling Bess high enough to be grabbed by the soldiers, and within moments, Punchinello and Bess were safely on the bridge and surrounded by the Wemmicks. Everyone asked Punchinello, how did you do that? It's easy, Punch said, when you're made of the right wood. For several moments, no one spoke. Then from the back, one of the Maple Wemmicks walked up to Punchinello. He removed his M from its chain and turned it upside down and made a W with it. Enough of all this talk about maples. Let's just be Wemmicks. And hanging the W now around Punchinello's neck, he added, Punchinello, you're the Wemmick of the day. One by one, the Maple Wemmicks removed their M's, placing them on the ground near Punchinello. Soon there was a small pile of these medallions. Even the mayor and his wife removed theirs, though she took one last look at herself and her M before she set it down. The Wemmicks started back toward town. The last thing anyone could remember about Miss Bess Stovall was seeing the majestic maple down by the river, searching all alone for her precious gold medallion. As for the villagers, they quit talking about ancestries and decided to just be Wemmicks again. And Punchinello? Well, he had a new job in town. "Say, Punch," a new Wemmick friend asked on the way back to the village, "there's a ball stuck in my chimney. Any chance you could reach it?" And when Punch did, he looked up the hill. Eli was watching from the porch of his house. Punchinello waved, and Eli, his maker, smiled. Thanks for joining with me today. The Lord's peace be with you.